welcome to another episode of Brettcast Transformers School. I hope you are enjoying the return of this series. I am sorry that these don't come out as often as videos in any of my other talk series, but these do take a little bit more time to write, record, and edit. Anyways, today we're going to continue with the 13 primes, and this episode is the first part of all that you want to know about Megatronus, also known as the Fallen. This will not include any of the movie continuities. I'm going to keep that as separate. So this is everything you need to know about Megatronus, Part 1. At the dawn of time, he was Megatronus, one of a brotherhood of vastly powerful beings dedicated to the well-being of their world. Megatronus gains the name of the Fallen because he turns on his fellow 13, and he is also known as the first Decepticons. He commands mystic and tropic arts, and when at full strength, he can unmake creation at his focused will. Like his brother, Megatronus is a multiversal singularity, meaning that in all of the multiverse, he has no alternate universe doppelganger, but that is now no longer the case. He is the originator of the Decepticons and the catalyst that prompted Megatron to claim power for himself rather than for the greater good. IDW Generation 1 Continuity. 12 million years ago, in the primitive age that followed the departure of the Knights of Cybertron, the bot who would become Megatronus was a humble nomad who wandered the deserts of prehistoric Cybertron alongside the shepherd Onyx and his flock of beasts. One day, the flock came across a badly damaged transformer in the waste. Unbeknownst to anyone, this was Shockwave, who had been cast backwards in time following the destruction of his chronal drive. Having recognized the figures for who they would become, Shockwave slew Onyx without a moment's hesitation, sending his followers fleeing, all of them, that is, except one of Onyx's compatriots. Realizing that he could use his understanding of Cybertron's past to set the planet's history along the preordained course that he knew it must follow, Shockwave dubbed Onyx's terrified compatriot Megatronus, naming him after the Decepticon leader that would one day arise. Fashioning a new body for himself from Onyx's remains, Shockwave became Onyx, knowing from the history that Megatronus's conquest would lead to the eventual unification of Cybertron. Onyx Prime trained Megatronus in their ways of war and deliberately inspired him to build an empire of his own. His tutelage complete, Shockwave set Megatronus on the lands to the west, and Shockwave's pupils soon established a kingdom that became known as the Darklands. As his power and influence grew over the course of his campaigns, Megatronus became a feared warrior and tyrant and took to calling himself the first who was named. Late into his conquest, Megatronus marched on neighboring Protohex and easily annexed it into the Darklands, overthrowing Thruer, Septimus Prime, and murdering the supplicants of Arius. There, he recruited the gladiator twins RC and Galvatron, who proved their loyalty to him by slaughtering their old master. The pair thus became the vanguards of the army as Megatronus continued their eastward advance, conquering the Forgotten Plains, disposing Liege Maximo and giving them the opportunity to attack the humble village that would one day become the Crystal City. Unbeknownst to Megatronus, Onyx Prime and Liege Maximo had arrived beforehand and galvanized the local tribes into allying with his army of beasts to battle Megatronus, and by doing so deliberately providing the necessary impetus that would unite the scattered tribes of Cybertron into a single civilization. Megatronus fought on the front lines before three titans, drawn to the sounds of battle, arose from the ground. Megatronus paused to look, giving Onyx the opening to fight his way through Megatronus's forces, meet with his old friend, and convince him to stand down. The two armies quickly ratified a proper truce, and Megatronus and his warriors joined the alliance of primes. By 8 million years ago, the 7 primes had been joined by 5 more, giving rise to the 13, who ruled over the 13 tribes. Many of the primes had grown arrogant, however, and began spreading rumors that only a prime could kill another prime so as to maintain their superiority over their followers. At Onyx's urging, Prima had begun a program of interstellar expansion that would spread the enlightenment of Cybertronian civilization to other worlds. Megatronus, Arcee, and Galvatron joined Onyx and Alpha Trion on this voyage, leaving Cybertron alongside Omega Supreme and the Omega Sentinels. However, they encountered resistance from the first planet they visited, and Megatronus and his warriors took part in the ensuing battle, a battle that ensured that the rest of the universe would come to fear the destructive power of the Cybertronians. Prima was enraged to learn of their benevolent mission had failed and blamed Megatronus for the disaster. When an insulted Megatronus was subsequently approached by Liege Maximo, the manipulative Prime stoked Megatronus's resentment and eventually brokered a secret alliance, a sequence of events that had been deliberately orchestrated by Shockwave so as to bring about the fall of the Primes as history had foretold. Megatronus and Liege Maximo sought to overthrow Prima, but in the ensuing struggle, Solus Prime sacrificed her life to defend their leader, allowing Megatron to run through her with her own Starsaber. Their conspiracy unveiled, the grand alliance between the Primes collapsed, and their followers fell to fighting amongst one another, heralding the beginning of the First Cybertronian Civil War. Megatronus subsequently fled the planet, leaving his co-conspirator to be imprisoned aboard his own Titan, Vigilum. Without Megatronus leading his tribe, his empire collapsed and his followers went their own ways. Galvatron became notable for deserting his post in Megatronus's faltering army in order to wage a personal crusade against the headmasters of Nexus Prime. By the time Galvatron hunted down and killed Nexus Prime, many of the remaining Primes had fled Cybertron entirely, and Megatronus had taken up residence in the barren of the old world of Taishi. I probably said that wrong. Using its voltaic blooms to fuel his systems. Seeking to bring him to justice, Prima, Alpha Trion, and Onyx Prime left Cybertron to search for him aboard the Titan emissary. They tracked down Megatronus to Taishi, where Prima and Onyx faced down the rogue Prime in a final duel. The ensuing battle, Megatronus simply bisected Prima with his own Starsaber. To ensure that the matrix of leadership in the sword's hilt would find its way to its next owner, when the time was right, however, Onyx coldly informed his student that his usefulness was at an end and murdered him, telling him that, thanks to the impending rise of Megatron, Cybertronians would, after a fashion, remember his name. On returning to Alpha Trion, Onyx told the record keeper the version of the events that would find their way into the records of Cybertronian myth, lying that Prima had heroically slain Megatronus at the cost of his own life, a fabrication based on stories that Shockwave had been told in his youth. Megatronus' name was stricken from the Cybertronian records for his crimes, and on both Cybertron and its colony worlds he was only remembered as the Fallen. When Alpha Trion recounted the story of the war's end to Optimus Prime, he was unable to elaborate on why Megatronus and Megatron shared such similar names. He was, however, able to point out that Shockwave had sent one of his Regenesis ores to Taishi, where Megatronus had resided. Unbeknownst to Trion, this was because Onyx Prime had manipulated events so that his younger self would select this planet for the Regenesis project. On the eve of Earth's official induction into the Council of Worlds, Alpha Trion told Optimus Prime, Starscream, and Pyra Magna the story of how Megatronus' conquest had first brought the 13 together all those years ago. Starscream questioned if he was represented in the story by Arcee or Megatronus, believing the latter to be a made-up name. When Onyx Prime and his tribe of Maximals invaded Cybertron some weeks later, Devastator, driven by Scoop's religious fanaticism, reached an earth-shattering epiphany. The duplicitous, backstabbing Starscream was the reincarnation of Megatronus. Initially unsure of this revelation, Starscream went with it until Shockwave, unmasked as an imposter, revealed that he had orchestrated the decidedly mortal Starscream's disastrous rise and fall from power. Dreamwave Generation 1 Continuity. When Primus and Unicron first battled as planets, Primus created the 13 Transformers to assist him in planet mode. The Fallen's original purpose as one of the 13 was to oversee entropy, the orderly dissolution of all things in preparation for the next creation. But the concept of destruction fascinated him too much, and he lost sight of the goal of rebirth and the necessity of restraint. His investigations into the dark sciences led him to Unicron, to whom he gave himself. Corrupted by Unicron, the Fallen then tried to sabotage his creator's body. This attempt ended in failure, and the Fallen fled to his master, but there was little refuge to be found. They were both sucked into a black hole. Approximately 7 million years before the 21st century, Optimus Prime and Megatron were lost in a space bridge accident. This accident weakened the barrier between reality and the dimension in which the Fallen was trapped, allowing the Fallen to eventually break free and return to Cybertron. The Fallen set about initiating the Unbinding, to precipitate the return of Unicron, and spent years, if not millennia, subtly manipulating the Autobots and Decepticons, causing them to splinter into multiple sub-factions that engaged in a constant series of escalating conflicts. As the time for the Unbinding drew near, the Fallen recruited a trio of Decepticon outcasts, Bludgeon, Mindwipe, and Bugly, who hungered for a command of the occult. The Fallen promised them all manner of dark powers in exchange for serving him. Leading his 3 followers to the Well of Allsparks, hidden within Cybertron, he explained that the Unbinding required 4 particular Transformers who would function as angles in a geometry of dissolution, and named Grimlock as the first. The Fallen was proceeded to construct a strange machine within the Well of Allsparks in preparation for the Unbinding. Unfortunately, Bludgeon and friends got impatient for more than the Fallen's praise and demanded a more tangible reward, the arcane power he had promised them. The Fallen responded by grabbing Bludgeon's head and giving him a mere glimpse of what he sought. Images of a fiery vortex, demonic faces, stabbing swords, and a human skull engulfed Bludgeon. The Fallen stated that this was but a peek inside the dark door he would fully open if they served him well. This left Bludgeon suitably inspired to begin hunting down their targets. Bugly and Mindwipe leaked information to draw the Protectobots out into combat with Devastator, while Bludgeon hatched a plot to snare both Grimlock and Jetfire. Bludgeon, Bugly, and Mindwipe ambushed Jetfire as he attempted to cross-faction meeting with Shockwave. When Grimlock crashed the party earlier than they expected, however, the Fallen himself had to intervene and caught Grimlock's blazing Energo sword in his bare hand. Grimlock took one punch from the Fallen, yet still got back up, so the Fallen grabbed him by the shoulders and unleashed a huge blast of energy that put the Dinobot leader out cold. Shocked by the display, Jetfire surmised that the Fallen predated the Golden Age. The Fallen responded by knocking Jetfire out cold too. He then dragged Grimlock and Jetfire away and commanded his followers to gather the 3rd angle while he handled the 4th. The Fallen single-handedly abducted Blitzwing from his well-guarded holding cell in Autobot headquarters, shrugging off attacks by some of the Autobots' best warriors and causing their weapons to corrode away into uselessness with a mere gesture. Bludgeon's team, meanwhile, succeeded in acquiring Hotspot from the Protectobots. All 4 angles were strapped into the device in the Well of Allsparks. The Fallen theatrically explained to the awakening Jetfire that they were casualties in the War of the Gods and would be used to break the seal of Primus after which all chaos will follow. The Fallen continued his villainous monologue, apparently directing it not at Jetfire but at Primus himself, as the four Transformers' unique sparks were drained to unlock the seal of Primus. A combined army of forces and several factions defeated the Chaos Trinity and penetrated the Fallen's operation. By the time they reached the door, the Fallen was satisfied that the Transformers were too late, until Jetfire arranged a force field to surround the seal. The Fallen was farther impressed that Jetfire understood enough to try to contain the seal, but his distraction cost him victory. The God of Light himself was subsequently roused from his slumber, where he saw the Fallen. With a gesture of his radiant hand, Primus engulfed his wayward creation in a torrent of searing energy that was then sucked back into the seal of Primus. Shockwave broke the seal for his cloning experience, siphoning from within it the energy needed to create life. The Fallen's essence had then escaped and corrupted Sunstorm. Following the clone's death, the Fallen's essence passed into Jetfire. Within visions, the Fallen attacked the Autobot over and over, while around them various key moments in Cybertron's history unfolded. Jetfire returned to reality as the Autobots were digging him free from the frozen prison he had found himself in. He was unable to warn them that the Fallen's essence had taken root in his spark as they broke through the ice holding him. The aligned continuity. Megatronus was the 12th Prime created by Primus to defeat Unicron. Rightfully proud of his power and unwaveringly loyal to his creator Primus, he thought of himself as the warrior first and foremost, but his dark powers and conflicted nature meant that he was rarely at peace with himself. His artifact of power, the deadly Requiem Blaster, used stellar fusion as an energy conduit, exponentially increasing his already destructive powers. Viewing himself as an outsider, he frequently butted heads with the warrior of light Prima, to point where even the closest allies among the 13 viewed him as an unpredictable and unstable presence. In spite of this, he struck up a close relationship with Solus Prime, which eventually blossomed into a mutual romance. Not even Solus Prime's comforting presence could rein in Megatron's chaotic tendencies. His private insecurities and hidden fears continued to fester and soon gave way to something darker. 13 newly created primes soon began experimenting with their powers and strategizing for the upcoming conflict. Megatronus considered himself a warrior and trained alongside Vector Prime, Prima, Onyx Prime, and Amalgamus. Megatronus, having the closest connection with Unicron, offered advice to Solus Prime on how to create the best weapons to defeat the Chaos Bringer. Among their collaborative efforts were Dark Energon skins, which would protect the Primes from the toxic Dark Energon. Megatronus eventually requested that a blaster be made for him by Solus Prime. She reluctantly agreed, and the Requiem Blaster was forged. Solus had doubts about the weapon, but her deep faith in Megatronus was what allowed her to trust him with the blaster. When the fight against Unicron came, Megatronus fought alongside his siblings and was ultimately triumphant. However, some of Unicron's darkness had rubbed off on them all, in a fact that Megatronus strangely appeared to revel in. In the era of peace and rebuilding that followed, Megatronus worked alongside Liege Maximo, Macronus Prime, and Amalgamus Prime, refining Energon for future use. He slowly befriended more of the 13, although his love for Solus Prime never faded. Unfortunately, this period of peace was not to last. Megatronus and Solus Prime were both being manipulated by Liege Maximo, who managed to drive a schism between the two lovers. Megatronus confronted Solus Prime over a newly created suit of armor intended for Maximo's farm. Their disagreement eventually grew into a full-fledged fight after Megatronus killed her pet, which had secretly been recording Solus Prime's actions. In the chaos, Megatronus fired the Requiem Blaster without thinking, fatally wounding Solus Prime. Before Solus Prime passed away, however, she professed her love for him. Megatronus hid himself away in the untamed regions of Cybertron until the surviving Primes discovered him Megatronus confessed his crime but also accused Maximo of setting up the whole plot and aimed to kill him once for all. The accusations flew quickly, and before long, the argument descended into a free-for-all. In the aftermath, Liege Maximo was apparently blown apart by a shot from the Requiem blaster, although Alphatron could not identify who had fired the weapon. Along with the surviving primes, a repentant Megatronus attended Solus Prime's funeral. Renaming himself the Fallen, he donned Solus Prime's suit of armor and went into exile in space, never to be seen again. Eons later, a young gladiator and social rhetorician named D16 took inspiration from ancient folk tales, renaming himself Megatronus. Aligned continuity novels. Megatronus conceived the idea of the Requiem blaster, a weapon so powerful that it dwarfed all other weapons in existence. With great reluctance, Solus Prime agreed to forge the weapon for Megatronus. Even then, only after Megatronus convinced the other two members of the 13 to petition her on his behalf as well. Even after the weapon was completed, Solus Prime showed great reluctance in allowing it to remain in existence. After demonstrating its awesome power to the 13, she asked for a vote as to whether the Requiem blaster should be destroyed. Megatronus led the group who voted in favor of retaining the blaster, and they won by the slimmest of margins, 7-6. At some later date, Megatronus killed Solus Prime in a fit of rage and became the Fallen forevermore. The reason for the murder is not fully known at this point, although Solus Prime did favor Nexus Prime over the other in the 13, a fact that had stirred jealousy in Megatronus in the past. Though a terrible thing, Vector Prime considered the Fallen lashing out in a moment of anger forgivable over Liege Maximo's act of plotting. Megatron, who took his name to inspire fear, took a favorable view of the Fallen, considering him the one member of the 13 who refused to bow down to the others, and the only Prime who sought his own destiny. Prime Wars Trilogy. Long ago, Megatronus was hailed as a hero for his defeat of Unicron using the Requiem blaster. However, he and his lover Solus Prime clashed over what to do with the blaster afterwards, as Megatronus wanted to keep it for his own rather than see it destroyed. As the two fought, the weapon was accidentally discharged, killing Solus and leaving Megatronus to grieve. The other primes took back the blaster from Megatronus, sealing it away, and he placed himself into exile until he could find a way to reunite with his deceased love. Many years ago, Megatronus orchestrated the events of both the Combiner Wars and Trypticon's resurrection from behind the scenes in an attempt to claim the Enigma of Combination and the Matrix of Leadership. To this end, he recruited Overlord to his cause and guided him to the Matrix of Chaos within Unicron's remains, promising Overlord immense power after his plan had succeeded. Hot Rod also joined the ranks of his acolytes after Overlord used the Matrix of Chaos to turn him into Rodimus Kron. After Trypticon's defeat, Victorion attempted to claim the Enigma and Matrix, but Megatronus surrounded them with a fiery aura, destroying part of Victorion's arm. He appeared before the other Transformers, warning them that their time had come to end. Megatron attempted to distract Megatronus with an angry outburst, giving Optimus Prime and Fortress Maximus a chance to surprise attack him, but Megatronus brushed Maximus aside and killed Optimus Prime. With no one else daring to challenge him, Megatronus took the two relics and departed to complete his plans. Determined to reunite with Solus, Megatronus turned his sights toward the missing Requiem blaster. Unsure where it might have been hidden, he began searching in the most likely hiding places, burning them to the ground when left empty-handed. In the Well of All Sparks, he installed the Enigma and Matrix into an unknown device and began gathering the sparks of Overlords and Rodimus Kron's victims. Taking notice of the blaster being fired, Megatronus rushed to the Athenaeum Sanctorum, where he revealed his plan to combine the Matrix and blaster into a weapon capable of ripping the spark from every transformer. After clashing with Megatron, Optimus Primal, and a Unicron-possessed Rodimus, he grabbed the blaster and took off to put his plan into motion. Megatronus returned to the Well of Sparks and installed the blaster, activating his Doomsday weapon. The machine began to drain everyone's sparks as planned, causing Solus to manifest, but they were interrupted by the arrival of Megatron and his team. Refusing to lose, Megatronus shot down Windblade, but was restrained by Grimlock and Optimus Primal. However, the sight of his nearly resurrected lover gave him the strength to break free, and he burned all the others except Megatron, who moved to protect them. Before he could finish them off, their battle was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Rodimus Kron, now totally under Unicron's control. Determined to destroy Megatronus and Solus for being part of Primus 13, along with the Matrix, Megatronus battled against Unicron while repeatedly having to divert his attention towards the others attacking the device. Temporarily incapacitating Unicron, Megatronus attacked the others despite Solus's pleas for him to stop, and was unable to prevent them from releasing the relics as the Matrix transformed Primal into Optimal Optimus. While Unicron attacked the new Prime, Megatronus made a grab for the Enigma and Blaster, only to be restrained by the other heroes. He managed to overtake them and grab the blaster, seeking vengeance for the failure of his plans. He was caught off guard by a new arrival Predaking landed on him from above. The two briefly battled before Megatron gained the upper hand and ripped off his head, and he attempted to stop Megatron from destroying Solus. His lover, however, suddenly grew in size and grabbed him. Despite his pleas that his love for her was everlasting, she rebuked him and dragged him into the well, finally killing him. So that's the end of the first video about Megatronus. The next one will be about him in the movie universe. That's all I have to say, so thanks for listening and goodbye.